What's up, everyone, and welcome to Save or Death. Wow, that feels really weird saying after basically not making any videos for about 2 years on this channel. And honestly, I made this channel quite some time ago, just kind of out of curiosity. I felt like I had a ton of information. I knew a lot about min-maxing builds, and that's something I'm going to continue to do at some point here in the near future because I have gotten back into D&D. I mean, I took a 2-year hiatus because I had some real life stuff going on. I also just wasn't playing D&D in general, so it's kind of hard to make content about a hobby that you're not even participating in and kind of getting the passion and the effort and the energy to actually do it. So now that's kind of coming back, I will be starting a campaign here in a little bit with a group of friends. It'll take a couple months though, because a lot of people are doing stuff. So I think the other thing that kind of brought me back for the most part too was that One D&D was just announced, I think less than a week ago, and they're going to try some new unearthed arcana this year that's going to be fully released in 2024. So I'm not going to talk too much about all this new marketing stuff that D&D is doing. Is this going to be 5.5 or 6th edition? Personally, I think it's more of a 5.5 edition. Just as a bit of background, like I didn't even start playing D&D till like 2016, so I've been only playing D&D for the better part of about 6 years now. But over the last 2 years, I took a bit of a hiatus. But during those 4 years I played, man, I was playing a lot. And some of the times I was playing 4 to 5 games a week, like in full-fledged campaigns, as well as little one-shots. I was doing a ton of Adventurers League. So I got a lot of exposure to a lot of min-max munchkin builds. I also got exposed to a lot of very degenerate, but yet very fun builds that you can kind of do in Adventurers League. So I had a ton of fun. I do want to kind of get back into making videos again, but again, I'm not sure if I get a lot of views on this and I get a lot of feedback and people are interested in me making more videos, I'll definitely probably continue. But for now, we'll go ahead and just jump right into it. So I set it up this way just because I just like the dark mode. A lot of the other YouTube videos and live streams I watched, the screen was just super bright and I didn't really enjoy it, but I still kind of, watched the stream. So I'm going to do it this way. So if it's a little bit harder to read, I apologize, but this is kind of like the best I could do. I tried opening it in different platforms, but it just wouldn't let me. So first things first, I'm actually going to start towards the bottom because I think there are some conditions, there's some features, there's some changes fundamentally rule set wise that I think is more important to cover first, and then we can look at the races as well as the feats and some other things a bit later. So spells for the most part, I'm not going to read everything verbatim. I'm going to cover some of this. I'm sure a lot of you guys watching this video have already watched 3, 4, 5, 6 other videos talking about the same thing, and you guys are just trying to get new and different ideas. So first thing I noticed is our arcane spell list doesn't have Eldritch Blast. I think a lot of people, including myself, think it's going to be more of a class feature rather than just a spell you can take, or that it's a spell that someone else could take if they just took Magic Initiate or something like that. So as you can see here, arcane spells, divine spells, and primal spells, those are basically the 3 categories of spells that have been categorized in this scenario. So if paladins do have access to divine spells, now they're gonna have access to things like healing word, and same thing with something like ranger for the most part only had access to like Goodberry as well as cure wounds. Now they're also gonna have access to healing word if they have access to the primal spell list. So one thing I'm definitely gonna notice, or at least one thing that I've noticed, is that I think a lot of classes that never had access to certain spells before will have access to them now. Obviously, Bard, arcane spell list. I think if we scroll up here, spell list, arcane divine primal, there's somewhere around here that does kind of explain which classes get access to certain spells. But when it comes to arcane spells, it's a PHP. Okay, maybe it'll explain it up here a little bit further. I don't remember exactly which part, but now essentially, yeah, bards and warlocks or some other spellcasters as well also gonna have access to things like shield, which is going to be pretty important because for the most part, that was one thing that Bard always struggled with, was defensive spell options. Like they didn't really, I think as far as I can remember, they didn't really have access to things like mirror image or anything like that. They kind of had to just rely on their AC, staying away at a distance, kind of relying on some crowd control spells in order to kind of keep themselves alive. So a lot of things are going to be changing. So expect, quite frankly, especially after Magic Initiate, which is something we'll cover here in a little bit, expect pretty much every single spellcaster in the game to have access to either one of these or both of these, which is shield and healing word, which are very obnoxious spells, I think, for the DM. Not obnoxious in a bad way, but just expect characters to be going up and down a lot and have every character basically have access to healing word, and that if you do want to hit a character with a really hard-hitting attack, they can always shield it for the most part. But regardless, we're going to jump into this. Unarmed strike. So grapple, in my opinion, overall got it's like a buff and a nerf. So it's weird because grapple is no longer based off your athletics check. And before, in order to escape, you had to use like athletics or acrobatics to escape. So in order to initiate a grapple, you need to do opposing or contested athletics check with your target. And then afterward, if you wanted to escape, it took a full action in order for you to escape. And then it was another contested athletics or acrobatics check. Now it's like, if you want to grapple the target, all you have to do is land a hit with an unarmed strike, which apparently now every single creature has basically proficiency with an unarmed strike. It says your bonus to hit with an unarmed strike equals your strength modifier plus your proficiency bonus. So it sounds like pretty much everybody has access, or not access, but everyone has proficiency in unarmed strikes now. And on your hit, your unarmed strike causes one of the following effects of your choice. So you can either do damage, you can grapple, or you can shove. Shove, nothing really changed. Damage is the same, but grapple, basically, now if you land a hit, instead of doing damage, now you can grapple instead. So you can actually forego one of your attacks, it seems, in order to land a grapple. So now that I think grappling is AC based instead of basically skill based, now you can have wizards, sorcerers, or any other class that can cast shield. Now you can essentially just shield a grapple. So if a creature did want to grapple you with an unarmed strike, you can just shield it. Like, okay, they landed the hit, you know, a creature comes up to you and lands an unarmed strike and you feel like they might grapple you. Like, no, I'm just going to shield it. So now they just can't grapple you, which seems really, really awkward. But I do think, based on the fact that bards and a lot of other classes are getting access to shield, I do think Wizard of the Coast is going to rework shield, like the spell itself. They could do something like when you cast the shield spell, now it's just your proficiency bonus is equal to your proficiency. So at levels 1 through 4, it's just a +2. And then it's level 5 through whatever, it's going to be +3, and it's going to go up from there. Because I do see, I mean, honestly, shield was always a bit slightly overtuned, in my opinion, especially at the lower levels. That it's just, you just can't get hit for a full round almost, unless they basically crit you or roll insanely high. But yeah, anyway, I'm kind of going off on a tangent. Tremor Sense. So Tremor Sense is something that dwarves have gotten, which we're going to cover here in a little bit, or I should say much later. Tremor Sense can't detect creatures or objects in the air, and Tremor Sense doesn't count as a form of sight. So a lot of people are saying that this Tremor Sense is OP, and like now it basically negates sight, or like now you can like hit a creature while it's invisible or something like that. The whole disadvantage thing of like trying to hit a creature you can't see is a bit weird, but for the most part, this doesn't count as a form of sight. So basically, this is just kind of like an early alarm system for something like dwarves. You can maybe sense how many creatures are coming at you, or maybe you can sense that there's extra creatures, or that roughly how close they are, things like that, but it doesn't count as a form of sight. So if you are blinded for some reason, it's not like you can make a roll, a flat roll, just because you can sense them close to you. So that is kind of something to bring up. What's the other thing here? Primal spells. Yeah, this is what we were talking about earlier. So druids and rangers harness the magic. For the spell, for a partial list of primal spells, see the spell list below. Okay. Another thing is the slowed condition. So they actually added a new condition called the slowed condition, which I'm surprised this was not in the game earlier. It says limited movement. You must spend 1 extra foot of movement for every foot you move using your speed. I kind of like the way this is worded, because a lot of people are saying, why not just say half your speed? Like it costs half your speed to move or something like that. So what if you were grappling a creature and you're trying to move it, which is half your speed, but halfway through you want to let go? Is your speed still halved? So it goes from 30 to 15, and then let's say you use 10 feet of movement, you still have 5 left, or is it you have 15 left because now you let go of the creature? I always thought that part was a bit weird. So I think actually wording it this way, that it costs 1 foot of movement for every foot you have to, using your speed. I like that wording a bit better than just saying your speed is halved and that's it. Because it gets a bit awkward if you want to use half your movement to drag a creature, and then you let go, and then you stole the other half of your movement. Does your movement now increase because you let go of the creature and you're no longer dragging them? That's a very weird aspect. So I'm kind of glad they worded it this way. Attacks affected, attack rolls against you have advantage, and dexterity saves affected, you have disadvantage on dexterity saving throws. So this is actually a condition that you will have. We'll cover that a little bit later, but that's just kind of a general basis. If you're slowed, you basically cost 1 foot of movement for every, or cost 2 feet of movement for every one. Advantage, attack rolls have advantage and against you, and then dexterity saving throws have disadvantage. Musical instruments, yeah, nothing's really changed there. Interrupting rest, so I don't think this has changed much. All that's kind of confirmed is that, well, this is actually kind of a big thing, because before, I think, at least how we played it, I think in Adventures League years ago, is that whenever we were taking a long rest and there was an encounter or something that happened, as long as that whole encounter took like less than an hour, which encounters usually don't take longer than an hour, but if something was happening, or if we were interrupted for any reason for longer than an hour, that actually interrupted our long rest and we had to start all over. But now this is saying like any kind of encounter of any kind, interrupts your long rest, and now you have to do it all over. So it's not like a timed based thing. Now it's just like if you're interrupted for any reason, for the most part, now you have to start all over. Though if you do rest for at least 1 hour, you do gain the benefits of a short rest, which is pretty nice. Benefits of a rest, you know, this and that. A lot of people are theorizing too that Wizards of the Coast might change it to short rest or is strictly a hit dice thing, and they're going to remove a lot, if not pretty much all, of the class abilities that refresh on a short rest and make them more based on proficiencies, you know, tied to your proficiency bonus per long rest. So you can do this X amount of times your proficiency per long rest or something like that, rather than you refresh this on a short rest, because you have a lot of classes like Druid and Monk and then that regain a lot of stuff on a short rest. Then you have some other classes like actually it's Druid, Cleric, and there's some classes that benefit a lot from short rest, like Warlock and Monk are the two main ones I can think of. And there's some classes that gain some stuff from a short rest, like Cleric and Druid, but not too much. And then you have some classes that basically benefit nothing, like Sorcerer or you know, Barbarian, things like that. They benefit from nothing. So it's like you have a third of the party that benefits a lot, a third of the party that kind of benefits, and then the other third that doesn't benefit at all. And it kind of really bogs down the game. Long rest, losing inspiration. So talking about inspiration, not a huge fan of the changes of inspiration. So when you have inspiration, you can expend it to give yourself advantage on a d20 test. You must decide so before rolling the die. Me personally, I'm not a huge fan of just like giving yourself advantage preemptively. I kind of like the fact that you can like roll and then like give yourself advantage after the fact, like after you see the roll. But it makes sense with inspiration, especially since now that gaining inspiration, anytime you roll an exact 20, not a dirty 20, so you're like roll something and your modifiers equal 20, you land right on a 20, so natural 20, you get a point of inspiration, but you can only have one at a time, as you can see here. So you can't store and have like 2 inspirations saved up. You only get 1 at a time. You either use it or you lose it for the most part, especially since you can lose inspiration after a long rest. So it's one of those things, if you have it, you might as well use it sooner rather than later. But then again, I've always found myself saving it for that right time, and I just end up not using it. There have been times in, I was gonna say Pathfinder, but no, times when I was doing the Adventure League, where I would have a point of inspiration for like 6, 7, 8+ sessions in a row, and like either forget I had it, or I would always save it, be like, all right, well, I never know when I'm gonna use it. I never know. Well, I'm gonna save it for a saving throw, because those are the most crucial, right? It's usually saving throws in order to use it. And a lot of the time, honestly, most of the time I just forgot. So some of the changes are gonna be interesting, but I'm not a huge fan of how easily accessible it is to gaining inspiration on a d20 test. It could be easy for some players to say, oh, I want to inspect that rock and I want to do a perception check here and I want to remember something historically about this aspect or this deity or whatever. And like people are just going to be spamming ways to doing d20 rolls in order to get, you know, these inspiration if they do use it for the day or whatever it is. So I'm still on the fence about that. Overall, I'm probably 60-20, like 60% like I'm not in favor of it, and 40% like, we'll see how it plays out. But incapacitated says inactive, you can't take actions or reactions. You lose your concentration, you can't speak. And it says surprise, if you are incapacitated when you roll initiative, you have disadvantage on the roll. So I think this might be the new surprise condition, because if we look a little bit later, there's the alert feat. Alert feat actually lost the ability to not be surprised, because I think the new surprise condition is just you have disadvantage on initiative rolls. So if a party, so instead of basically losing your entire round, and to be honest, getting the surprise round on a particular encounter really trivializes it. Like when you can set up your defensive spells, or you have all these characters in a small kind of group together and it's a surprise round and they have no idea you're coming, you can just launch a fireball and you're able to get them all while they're clustered together or whatever it is. You can just answer to the scenario perfectly, which I think surprise round is very, very like it's very strong. So I kind of like the fact that it's just disadvantage on the initiative roll rather than straight up just skipping your round. Because I know currently surprise, technically all it means is everyone rolls initiative, but with the creatures that are surprised just lose their first round. So then when that first round is done, the second round starts and then everyone plays it out normally. But usually more than half the creatures are dead by the time that second round comes about. So I do think this is going to be the new surprise condition, that if you are surprised, you're just lower on the initiative roll, right? You just have disadvantage. Let's see here. Grappled. Okay, so this is the grappled condition. So the new grappled condition. So speed is 0, which before that's all it was. If you're grappled, your speed is 0 and that's it, and can't change. Attacks affected, you have disadvantage on attack rolls against any other target than the grappler. So that's pretty interesting. I think that's pretty strong. I like that. It kind of reminds me a lot of the some of the ancestral barbarian like abilities, as well as the, like I said, it's been a while since I played D&D, but there was a fighter class, Cavalier, that could do something similar as well. Movable. The grappler can drag or carry you, but the grappler affects the slowed condition while moving unless you are tiny or 2 sizes smaller than the grappler. So I felt like this was, I'm not sure how I feel about this, because it actually takes on a lot of risk as the grappler. So if you are grappling something and then you're dragging it, all of a sudden everyone has advantage on you and you have disadvantage on dexterity saving throws, which I feel like is a bit weird, especially since now you can drag a creature, but what if you just let go at the end of your turn? So it says you basically can drag or carry you, but the grappler suffers the slow condition while moving unless you are tiny. So if while they're moving you, unless they basically don't provoke attacks of opportunity or something weird like that while they're moving you, they could just let go at the end of their round, and this whole slowed condition is just pointless, or it doesn't really matter, right? So not entirely sure how I feel about that. I feel like that can change that a bit, or it's like the grappler suffers the slowed condition until the end of their next turn, something like that, because it's too easy just to basically pull a creature and then you just let go at the end of your turn, and now you don't have the slowed condition anymore. Again, escaped AC. This is while grappled, you can make a dexterity or strength saving throw. So this is the equivalent of acrobatics or athletics to escape the saving throw. And this is a saving throw too. So you have to remember, like if you're a paladin or if you're within the range of a paladin, like you benefit from this kind of thing too. You can also use bless on this as well. So if you are blessed, you have advantage, not advantage, but you roll a d4 with the saving throw. So grapples are no longer skill checks, they are now saving throws. And on top of that, this is kind of what I mean about, you know, grapples being better, but at the same time being weaker, because you can do this at the end of your turn. So strength saving throw against the grapple's escape DC at the end of each of your turns, ending the condition on yourself on a success. The condition also ends if the grappler is incapacitated or if something moves you to the side. So things like Thunder Wave or some telekinetic abilities where you can like move creatures 5 feet. Even if you just moved 5 feet away from another creature, that breaks the grapple as well. So this is where, I mean, it's gotten buffed where it's easier. In some ways, it's easier to land a grapple. Grappling a creature makes them have disadvantage on attacks on other creatures and all that stuff. So this is really cool. But again, moving them gives you the slowed condition, but you can also just let go. So that's kind of a wash and a bit weird. But at the same time, they could just make a saving throw at the end of their turns, kind of like Hold Person or any other kind of spells like that, where they can just escape for free. Like it doesn't cost them an action. The huge benefit that I think early grapple builds, especially if you like expertise, like if you're a rogue, I think I've even seen a bard and Adventures League do expertise in athletics. They really cranked up their strength. They would cast silence on like a mage or something like that, and they would just grapple them, and they just couldn't move at all. So the mage is stuck, grappled, can't move, and he can't cast spells because he's in silence. And he was basically just getting beat to hell by a bard, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. But this basically turns into a saving throw. And yeah, I'm not really sure how I feel about this, turning it into a saving throw. And it happens at the end of your turn, so the creature has a chance to break out every single time. And creatures in D&D, especially, you know, the bad guys, some of the bigger ones, they have really good saving throws. And the odds are them escaping your saving throw is going to be probably pretty high, especially if it's based on strength. And if you're trying to grapple like an ogre or something like that, like they have really good, most creatures have really good strength saving throws. And the fact that early grapple builds were based on skills, that was really easy to do because there was no bonuses for skills for enemies like in the textbook or like the monster manual. Like there's no creatures that had a plus 15 to athletics or something like that. It was just basically based off their strength modifier, and that was it. And they didn't get a massive bonus to saving throws. Or they did get a massive bonus to straight saving throws, but not skill checks. But yeah, I'm going on a tangent. I know we're on 20 minutes. Jeez, we're pushing 20 minutes right now. This is my favorite and most unfun part about doing D&D videos, is like it's super in depth. Rolling a 1, this is another thing that a lot of people were kind of like and didn't like, was the D20 test. I don't mind the term test. There has to be some sort of term that encompasses saying ability checks, attacks, throws, and saving throws, because that is a mouthful. I think just honestly, rolling a D20, there's no other reason to roll a D20 other than ability checks, attack rolls, and saving throws. Ideally, they would just call it a D20 roll. Like, hey, just if you ever roll a 20 on a D20 roll, you just get inspiration. But I know a lot of the times it says when you roll a D20 roll, I think having roll twice would just be a bit weird. So, yeah, so rolling a 1 means you automatically fail. So this is something I'm not, a fan of. I know a lot of people play by these rules. Well, if you just roll a 1, you automatically fail, whether it's a skill check, whether it's, it says Twist automatically fails regardless of modifiers on the roll. So the way we played it, obviously in Adventures League, we played literally by the book. If you roll a 1 on an attack roll, you automatically fail. But if you roll a 1 on a saving throw or a skill check, it doesn't mean you automatically fail, because there's a lot of people that you can roll a 1 on a saving throw, but if you have a proficiency in Constitution and you have a +4 Constitution, and then you also have what's it called, that 1 feat that allows you to add your proficiency bonus to that saving throw, not Warcaster but the other one, I forgot what it was called, but anyway, there was ways where you can basically get like a +11 or like a +12 to like a saving throw, and even though you rolled a 1, you can still maintain concentration even if you roll a 1. So basically by these rules, now there's always a 5% chance you just automatically fail no matter what. And this does, as far as I can remember, this doesn't affect the rogue's ability, what's it called, reliable talent, because I believe it says it replaces a roll. It doesn't say the roll is changed, or like if you roll a 1, this happens. It says like instead of this happening, this just happens instead. So as far as I know, reliable talent still like supersedes the rolling a 1 part, as far as I can tell. Rolling a 20 means you automatically succeed. So I think people are gonna have to rein this in, obviously. So you can't just ask for the king's crown. You can't just ask something ridiculous. I would love for them to say, because it says if you roll a 20 on a d20, so if you roll a 20 on a d20, the d20 twist, there's a lot of 20s going on, thus automatically succeeds regardless of any modifiers for the roll. A character also gains inspiration when rolling the 20 thanks to the unremarkable success. Rolling a 20 doesn't bypass limitations on the test, such as range and line of sight. The 20 bypasses only bonuses and penalties to the roll. I would like to see something in here that says if you automatically succeeds, and somewhere in here I would love for it to say, but within DM's discretion, or within reason, or something like that, where it kind of leaves something up into interpretation by the DM, because you can't just ask the king for his crown. If you do, he might laugh. It's like, all right, I'll throw you in the dungeon for a week and not for your entire lifetime, because I think you're hilarious. So yeah, so there's things like that where I think people are kind of concerned that they're going to read this and be like, well, now I can just ask for anything, and as long as I just roll enough d20s, I could just automatically succeed no matter what. I don't think that's the case, but I definitely want to see a small bit of text that says like within reason or at DM discretion or something like that. So DM at least has a leg to stand on when the player does ask for something ridiculous. And I realize a lot of the time it's the DM that's asking for the roll, but sometimes you do have players that will just, hey, I'm going to do this, and I roll right away. And it is up to the DM to say, hey, look, like if you're going to do something, like don't roll right away, because sometimes it doesn't require a check. Other times I want to have a different kind of check done. But sometimes you will have players like, I want to talk to the king and I want him to give me his crown. And they just roll right away and they don't even ask. So critical hits. This is another big one. Weapons and unarmed strikes have a special feature for player characters. Critical hits. If a player character rolls a 20 for an attack roll with a weapon or an unarmed strike, the attack roll is also a critical hit, which means it deals extra damage to the target. You roll the damage dice of the weapon or unarmed strike a second time and add the second roll as an extra damage to the target. Long story short, the only things that can crit now are weapons and unarmed strikes. But on top of that, even if you do crit with a weapon, unless you're a paladin and you add a smite to it, or if you're a rogue and you add sneak attack, as far as we know right now, you only doubles the damage dice. So if you are a rogue and use a rapier, you only double the d8, not the 3d6 that gets added to the sneak attack. Same thing with paladin. If you hit with a greatsword, you don't double you only double the 2d6 of the greatsword. You don't double the 2d8 that gets added to the smite as well. So you only double the damage dice, or the weapon dice, which is a bit of a nerf. It definitely seems like this, if they do keep this, it does seem like everyone's going to be wielding literally like the nerf swords that you kind of see in like target stores and stuff like that. People are just going to be hitting not as hard. And honestly, the whole critical hits thing, that's what made a lot of D&D fun. Pumping smites into it, doing battle maneuvers, doing blade flourishes, doing all kinds of stuff. Even critting on Eldritch Blast, things like that. Honestly, I'm not completely against the idea of having spells not crit. I'm not completely against it, but overall, I don't like the fact that you can't add like smite damage or kind of any additional damage. And of course, a lot of people are saying like, whoa, don't jump the gun. What if you know, the rogue and the paladin and the battle master and all these different classes say, okay, but if you crit, you can add these dice and it doubles. All right, if we're going to add that many exceptions to the rule, then like just why even make it a rule? Because if it's like, all right, it just doubles the weapon dice, but if you add a smite or a sneak attack or a battle maneuver or a blade flourish or a hex or anything like that, any other stuff, like, okay, you can double the dice. Then why even have this be a rule? Just have it say double all dice. That's all it needs to say. And I think that's the easiest explanation for critical hits. It's like any dice you roll, you just double it, and then you add your, you know, the respective, you know, the respecting modifiers on it. So overall, not a huge fan of the critical hits. I would like to see it just stay the way it is for the most part. I'm not completely against the idea of having spells not crit, because I do think it will make something cool that martial classes can do, but spellcasters can't, and it does kind of give a bit of an edge towards them. Because at the end of the day, I mean, a warlock using Eldritch Blast, shooting, you know, 2 or 3 times around, having multiple chances, doing force damage, and doing charisma bonus on top of that. Essentially, they're just shooting glaives out of their hands, force glaives out of their hands, and that's something that spellcasters, or I should say like martial classes, can't do. So, all right, 25 minutes in, let's keep going here. Before we go on the feats, let's go ahead and go on to the races. Sorry, this is a little all over the place, but this is what happens when you make your first video after 2 years and you're trying to like get through all this stuff. So character races, children of different humanoids. So there's the human. We're just going to cover the meat and potatoes of it. We're not going to read all the flavor text and all that stuff. You guys can do that on your own. So all humans now can be medium or small. So one thing I'm thinking is that if they are allowing all, like most races, you know, I don't know, orcs and a few other races can't do it, but if they're allowing certain races to become small, so if you're a human, you can be medium or small, they're going to have to change, they're more than likely going to change some of the restrictions that are already in place for things like heavy weapons. So if you use heavy weapons as a small creature, so you can't be, I mean, I guess you can be a halfling that wields a great axe, but you're gonna have disadvantage because it's a huge weapon and you just can't wield it. I have a feeling they're gonna change that, because I just have a feeling they're gonna do it, especially since they're trying to make this more easily accessible, much more just easier for people to get into the game and not have to think of all these rules. So I do think the heavy property will still exist for classes like, you know, monk and things like that, but when it comes to just wielding it and not having disadvantage, I think they're going to go away with that. Same thing with something like Dimension Door. I think they're going to retext Dimension Door to say, all right, you can take any creature that is the same size you or like smaller and bigger. Like any creature that is one size bigger or smaller, you can take with you. So that way, if you are small, you can take that medium creature. So you can take an elf that's next to you if you are using Dimension Door as a gnome wizard or something like that. Because as of right now, it is kind of, it's a bit of a nerf, right? If you are a small creature and you're trying to use Dimension Door, you can only take other small creatures with you currently. So I do think because they're allowing people to become small, they will make some adjustments like that of spells and features that are based off of your size. All right, Resourceful. So 30 feet, all that stuff, 80 years. Resourceful, you gain inspiration whenever you finish a long rest. I think this is fine. I do think the whole inspiration feature is going to be a bit overplayed, and I don't think Resourceful is going to be that good, since technically in the morning you just like wake up, make a random skill check, and now you land a 20 and you're like, cool, I got inspiration. I guess I'll give it to someone else, because I mean, that is the thing you can do, is that if you get inspiration and you already have one, you can just give it to someone else in your party, which is super cool. But I just don't think Resourceful is, to be honest, good enough for a human. I don't know, I might regret saying that, because they are, if we look at these next two things, skillful, you gain proficiency in one skill of your choice, that's whatever. Versatile, you gain the skilled feat or another first level feat of your choice. So some of the first level feats are really good, and some of them not so good. We'll cover those here in a little bit, but essentially humans now are just variant humans. You basically get a first level feat, and you can get another first level feat based on your background. So it's going to be another thing we're going to be covering here in a little bit. Ardlings, new race. You can be medium or small. Again, you can pick to be small. Angelic Flight, as a bonus action, you sprout wings. You can travel your move speed. So basically, if you sprout your wings as a bonus action, you can move 30 feet. I would assume that if you dash as a normal action, you can go 60 feet. So if you're trying to like jump a chasm or cross a river or something like that, you can basically do that in 30 feet. And I think this is kind of what some people are afraid of whenever they try to give their party, you know, actual physical or like environmental encounters, like at low levels. If you just have an Ardling in your party, they can just take a piece of rope, put it in their mouth or in their hand. They can just basically essentially fly 60 feet for one turn across the river or across the chasm or whatever it is, and just be fine, right? Or, you know, fly up 60 feet and, you know, grab on and then do it again, fly up 60 feet, grab on. So I do think that is an issue some DMs might have, but overall, I don't think it's too overpowered. Now, this part I do think is a bit strong, and this is for a series of reasons. So here's all the spells here. You can either pick a Legacy, Exalted, Heavenly, or Idyllic. I think by far and away the strongest one is Idyllic. I mean, you get Guidance, Healing Word, and Animal Messenger. Animal Messenger is meh, but basically getting access to the best Cleric / Druid cantrip in the game, and then getting access to the best first healing spell in the game, just as a race. And not only that, you can, it says right here, starting at 3rd level, right here, you also get to pick the modifier that you can do with it. So Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma, it's your spell casting ability. For the cast, you have resistance to radiant damage, but there's somewhere around here that does say that as long as you have spell slots, you can keep casting these spells, meaning that you can be a wizard, use Healing Word as intelligence, and as long as you have spell slots, you can keep casting Healing Word. You can be a paladin, which I think they already have access to that list, but you can be a sorcerer and you still have access to Healing Word. As long as you have spell slots, you can do Healing Word as a bonus action and then do Toll the Dead or Firebolt or whatever as a main action. So, and then also getting Guidance is a very, very strong cantrip. I think it's probably one of the strongest utility cantrips. It is the strongest utility cantrip in the game, like bar none, in my opinion. Getting a D4 to ability checks is just crazy in my opinion. Heavenly, I think, is the next best one. Like Light is a decent cantrip. Cure Wounds is pretty good. Again, you can be a wizard or a sorcerer with just Cure Wounds by default. And again, now you have the capability of healing, which is, that was always kind of like the hamstring of being a sorcerer or a wizard. That was kind of the hamstring. It was like, well, they can't heal, right? So if someone is in danger or if the cleric goes down, either the martial classes have to run in and melee range and do Cure Wounds like a ranger, or they have to do a potion, kind of like a fighter would have to. That was kind of like the hamstring of the arcane spellcasters, let's say. But now it's like pretty much anyone that picks Idyllic, which I think this is the strongest one, pick Idyllic. Now you have access to Healing Word, and you can cast it as many times as you have spell slots. So I definitely see, again, as a min-maxing point of view, we are going to see a lot of Idyllic, and again, the mobility from flying too, right? So as a bonus action, you can just fly. So if you are feeling like you are being surrounded, or you're not in an advantageous position and you find a ledge or something like that, okay, bonus action, fly up. I fly away up into the ledge. Okay, now I can start raining down fire bolts, or now I can do fireball to get a better position, you know, line of sight or whatever it is. I do think we're going to see a lot of Idyllic Ardlings that are going to be playing Sorcerer and Wizard for the Healing Word benefit. And Guidance is, of course, insane too. I mean, you can cast Guidance on yourself, and then when initiative comes around, you can use that D4 on your initiative, because again, it is a skill check. It's a dexterity skill check, essentially. That's what a initiative roll is. And then you add a D4 on top of that, and then you always have Healing Word in your back pocket in case the cleric goes down or something happens. And again, because it's a spell, I mean, if you are a sorcerer, now you can twin cast Healing Word, because it's in your spell book now, twin cast Healing Word to 2 different characters. And that's very bad. And you don't have to be the Divine Soul Sorcerer to do that. Now you can basically take the best part. And that's what, honestly, if you want some healing capability, all you need is Healing Word. Like, you don't need Cure Wounds, you don't need Mass Cure Wounds or Mass Healing Word. Like, usually Healing Word is going to be good enough about 90% of the time. Only in very, very terrible situations where you have multiple party members down by the time you get up, that's when you want to have those mass abilities. But again, just twin cast Healing Word, and you get a free cast of this once per day. And then any times beyond that, you get, you have to have a spell slot. So I definitely see sorcerers. So essentially sorcerers and wizards and any spellcaster, they're going to have 5 first level slots because of this. And then on top of that, they, as long as they have spell slots, they can keep going. So I think we beat that one death enough, because like I said, I think we're going to see a lot of Idyllic, Ardling, wizards, and sorcerers, like a lot of them. But potentially warlocks too, because again, they don't have healing capability unless they take the celestial. Dragonborn, okay, I think these guys kind of got bent over. I know everyone talked about fizz bands, like they got changed a bit. I'm not familiar with that book, to be quite honest, but they're medium, 30 feet, 80 years of age. Dragon Ancestry, okay, that's all flavor stuff. You get to pick basically the damage type as well as the damage immunity or damage resistance that you have. So if your breath weapon, as an action, you exhale destructive energy in a 15-foot cone. Each creature in the area must make a dexterity saving throw against a DC equal to 8 plus your constitution modifier plus your proficiency bonus. On a failed save, the creature takes 1d10 plus your character level and damage, determined by your... On successful, the creature takes half as much. So typical breath weapon. So now it's always a cone. you don't get to pick whether it's a cone or a line. Before you kind of could. It was more based on the dragon. So I know certain dragons had a line and certain dragons had a cone. I think right now the damage is too little. It's a bit confusing, the fact that it's like based on your constitution modifier, but then you get to add your character level. Like there's no other character ability that I can think of off the top of my head that like something that is based off your constitution modifier, and then on top of that it's based on your character level. I know Goblin has that ability where they can add their level to like damage randomly to like one attack or something like that, and then constitution modifier is just something you don't see very often. So this is a bit awkward. I would still leave that, but what I would like to see is the ability to choose a line or a cone. They could easily just say you exhale destructive energy in a 15-foot cone or a 30-foot line, and you get to pick each time. So one round you could do a cone, but the next round, because the way everything lines up, everyone's lined up in a line, you just do a line attack. I think you should be able to choose between a 15-foot cone or a line. So it says you do destructive energy in a 15-foot cone or a 30-foot line. I think you should be able to choose both either time. Like you have such good control over your breath weapon, you could do either or, and I think that's fine. And then here it's dexterity saving throw, all that stuff is fine. But I'd like to see it change to a bonus action, to be honest. Like I would like to see this so that way it's actually good for martial classes, because as you level up, your action becomes stronger. If you're a martial class, you get 2 attacks, 3 attacks, whatever it is. If you're a spellcaster, your action is going to be used for things like counterspell, or not counterspell, but like fireball or slow or some other like really, really powerful spells you have access to. But now it's like, all right, I want to do a breath weapon that does like 1d10 plus your character level. I don't know. Personally, what I would like to see is either they change this to a bonus action and you can use a 30-foot line and 15-foot cone, or make it so that you get a d10 like a pool of dice. You get a d10 pool of dice that is equal to your proficiency bonus. So if you're level 5, you get 3 d10 that you can use however you want. You can either roll them all at one time, or you can take them out individually. You would still add your character level each time you use it. So it's one of those things where it's like, is it better to roll 3 d10 right now plus my character level, or I can spread it out and do more damage, but that's going to take 3 turns. Like I'd rather see the pool of dice where you actually have to make a conscious decision that if I'm going to use this once, I'm going to give it all I have, and then that's it, right? I'd rather do a lot of, like me personally, I'd rather do a lot of damage in one turn to multiple creatures, especially if you roll high in initiative. Sometimes you have 3 or 4 creatures clustered together, and it's like, oof, I wish I could just do all of my uses right now instead of, all right, I do a little bit here, and now the next round I would do it, but I have two of my allies in the way, and I can't do it now, so now I have to like step aside here and do it again. Like, it's just not that good. I'd rather see a pool of dice be used, and you can divvy it up however you want, or again, just more options when it comes to line or cone. Damage resistance, dark vision. Okay, dark vision finally puts them up to par to like the other classes. And the draconic language, you instinctively know the language of dragons. I still think like Dragonborn need more, because they're still that race that all they have is damage resistance and a breath weapon, and that's it. Like, I mean, Ardlings are kind of the same thing, but at least they can fly. Like that's really, really good utility, and they have a resistance, and they get spells. Dragonborn, all they have is breath weapon resistance. Dark vision, it's base. Like dark vision is a given, honestly. So I think Dragonborn can maybe use one more thing. Not entirely sure what it is, but I think Dragonborn could definitely use one more thing, whether it's natural armor, or I think claw attacks are like too weak, in my opinion. And I think there's already feats for that in like some additional D&D content. So Dragonborn and mini worlds, blah, blah. So dwarves. So interesting stuff about dwarves here. Let me take a drink. As a dwarf, you have these special traits: dark vision, dwarven resilience. You have resistance to poison damage. You also have advantage on saving throws you make to avoid or end the poison condition on yourself. So someone said before, sorry if this is going to be really bright, but someone said before, this is actually a nerf to dwarves. You have advantage on saving throws against poison, and you have resistance against poison damage. Okay, so there is a difference. So dwarves before had resistance to poison damage and saving throws against poison. It doesn't say anything about the poison condition. It just, I guess if something does poison spray or whatever, you have an advantage against that saving throw. And if you do get hit, you at least have resistance to the poison damage for the most part. Okay, let's get this one. But now it's a bit different to where now you only have advantage on saving throws to avoid or end the poison condition. So if something is not going to impose the poison condition, you don't have advantage on it. So, okay, you do have resistance to poison damage. Okay. So the only thing that's changed is that if something is trying to give you the poison condition, you have advantage. But if something is trying to do poison damage to you, you don't have advantage on that saving throw. I believe that's how it's described. Dwarven Toughness, your hit point maximum is increased by 1 per level. That's awesome. Basically, they just added the heal dwarf feature. Forge-wise, your divine character. Okay, you basically add 2 tool proficiencies. So you can do jeweler's tools, mason tools, smith tools, or tinker tools. Stone Cunning. I like this ability a lot. It's a bonus action. You can gain Tremor Sense with the range of 60 feet for 10 minutes. You must be on a stone surface or touching. So we definitely could start seeing some, you know, dwarf rogues. I think that'd be really cool. It's definitely an awesome scouting tool that if you're going up ahead, you're trying to figure out how many people are patrolling beyond a wall or beyond a door. You can kind of put your hand down and you can kind of sense their footsteps or if they're not moving. So it's not 100% foolproof, but at least it gives you an idea of maybe how many guys or how many creatures are on the other side of a door, or maybe further down the cavern, farther than you can see. So we'll see. But it says your bonus action number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. So we're definitely going to be seeing a lot of that, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So if you guys haven't noticed, they got rid of all of the weapon proficiencies as well as any armor proficiencies that the race gets. So it sounds like Wizards of the Coast is getting rid of any and all weapon and armor proficiencies that is associated with the class. We're going to cover the elf here in a little bit. You know how they had proficiency with like long swords and bows? Like they got rid of all that stuff because a lot of it was like really repetitive, honestly. Or let's say redundant, let's say not repetitive. It was redundant with the classes you took, especially if you took a class that was like a martial class, you know, a fighter, you have proficiency in everything anyway. So that kind of a racial feature was just kind of wasted for the most part. So I think dwarf is fine. I think it's fine. So again, it's like they just have more things going on. They have dwarven resilience, they have dwarven toughness, forge wise, and stone cunning. But then you look at Dragonborn, all they really have that's of note is damage resistance and breath weapon, and that's it. You know, and it costs a full action. Dwarves thing is, I know it's a utility thing, it's not based on damage, but they can do it as a bonus action. So all right, moving on. Elf, here it is. Elven lineage. Okay, basically, so you have dark vision, Fey ancestry. You have advantage on saving throws to avoid or end the charm condition on yourself. Keen senses, you have proficiency in the perception skill. Trance is kind of a cool flavor thing, but can be helpful in certain scenarios. And again, you get to pick one of 3 kind of like lineages that give you spells. So very similar to the Ardling. The range of your dark vision is 120. You also know the Dancing Lights cantrip, so no more sunlight sensitivity. So now you can make attack rolls. And to be honest, there were times where I did want to play a drow, but I just did not want to deal with the sunlight sensitivity. I also didn't want to subject my DM to like, hey, okay, we're in this room, but like, how much sunlight is in here? Or like, is there enough? Or like too much? Or like, what if I stand here? And what if I'm in sunlight? I know it's bad, but what if the guy's in sunlight and like he's like reflecting? I know it's super weird. So I'm glad they made this change. They have access to Fairy Fire and Darkness, both pretty good spells. I know some people said it would be nice if the drow could actually see through their own darkness. I think that would just make sense because it seems like darkness is just honestly just a very troublesome spell. Like everyone that takes darkness, they wish they could see through it because it's so troublesome, not only for themselves, but for their allies. And then sometimes you cast it and you're not sure if it's helping you or your enemies, and it's just very confusing. But High Elf, you know the Prestidigitation cantrip. Whenever you finish a long rest, you can replace that cantrip with a different cantrip from the arcane spell list. So yeah, I like this a lot. I mean, you can exchange it out for Firebolt. You can change it out for, I guess technically Toll the Dead. I know that was, I believe, a Xanathar's spell, something like that. I'm just going to scroll down here really quick. Trying to see like what other good cantrips there are. You know, Mage Hand. The fact that you can change out a spell per long rest is honestly very, very handy. So if you need Mage Hand, you know, you're going to be sneaking into a compound, you might need Mage Hand to open some doors, open some traps, things like that. Like that could be very, very helpful. Same thing with Prestidigitation. I really, really like that a lot. Let's see here. Gnomes, we're not on Gnomes yet. Elves. Detect Magic is good. Misty Step is amazing. Misty Step is great mobility, and you can still cast a cantrip, obviously, as your main action. And then Wood Elf, your speed increases to 35 feet. You also know the Druidcraft cantrip. So Long Strider is great. And again, any of these spells that you get as a race, you get to cast that spell for free. And then on top of that, you can keep casting it as long as you have spell slots. I don't know if you can cast Long Strider and pass without trace. as a spell, like for free. You get to cast Long Strider for free and Pass Without Trace for free, or you get to cast one or the other for free. I have to read that. Once you cast the spell with this trait, you can't cast that spell but again until you finish a long rest. Starting at 3rd level and again at 5th level, you can gain the ability to cast a spell with this trait. Once you cast the spell with this trait, you can't cast that spell. So if it would say you can't cast a spell or a spell trait or like an Elven lineage spell. So yeah, you can cast one of these for free each day, or you can cast one of each. So you cast Fairy Fire for free and then Darkness for free. So basically you're getting kind of like a 1st level and a 2nd level spell slot for free, which I do think these are going to be very beneficial. I would say from best to worst, kind of what I did with the Ardling, I think Wood Elf, in my opinion, is the best. A High Elf is a very close second. I do think the utility of swapping out cantrips and Misty Step is really, really good. Detect Magic isn't always needed. Sometimes it's good for sneaking through a dungeon, or if you're out and about kind of role playing and you kind of want to just see who has magic items and stuff around you. That could be helpful. But I think the Wood Elf, like the Long Strider, you can cast on yourself or someone else for unconcentrated extra 10 feet of movement. Pass Without a Trace is going to be amazing. Curious to see how good it's going to be, considering surprise round and all that stuff could be very different. That could change, especially since, again, you do Pass Without a Trace, so you can sneak around and either get the surprise round, or if you're something like a rogue and you get the surprise round and you can get sneak attack. All right, my sneak attack dice isn't getting doubled because of the new crit rules. A lot of stuff could be affected, so some spells could be very strong, or some spells could be kind of brought down based on the surrounding mechanics of how 5.5e is going to be incorporated. Elves and Many Worlds, blah, blah, blah. So Gnomes. Kind of like what they did with Gnomes here. So you have Dark Vision, of course, Gnome Cunning. This is huge. So you have advantage on Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma saving throws. That's it. Like, it's not based on spells anymore. So before it used to be based on magic. So if someone's casting Slow or Fear on you, whatever it is, you had advantage. But if the dragon's just kind of like Fear aura around him, he's not casting a spell. It's just an innate ability that the dragon has. You would not have advantage on that in the old edition, or at least the kind of the original edition of 5e. But now with this, anytime your Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma, you have a saving throw, you just have an advantage. So now the dragon's Fear aura, you have an advantage. Or some other big bad evil guy abilities that do Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma, whether it's a spell or not, you just have advantage no matter what. So that is a pretty significant buff, in my opinion. And more often than not, I bet you there were some people that were playing Gnome rolling advantage when they probably shouldn't have. I mean, that stuff kind of happens. Sometimes the DM just says an ability, all right, everyone just make a Wisdom saving throw. You don't know if it's a spell or an ability, and sometimes if the Gnome remembers, they'll be like, all right, is this a spell or is this a magic thing? Sometimes that happens. Gnome lineage. So you get to pick basically Forest Gnome, which allows you to have Minor Illusion and speak with animals, which is kind of cool. And then Rock Gnome. This thing is very, very... I like this flavor-wise. It's awesome. But the fact that this whole text takes up 90% of the gnome race block. Honestly, all this could just be simplified down to you can preemptively cast Prestidigitation 3 times a day and put it into a device. And you can have 3 such devices in existence at a time. And then put this last paragraph. All they have to say is you can cast Prestidigitation into a device and then activate it later as a bonus action. So, because that's pretty much all it is. You can have it, make a sound. You can start a fire or put out a fire. Kind of give some examples here, but this is a very, very long-winded way of saying you can cast Prestidigitation 3 times preemptively and give it to your allies to do certain things, and that's it. So flavor is a +10, but the explanation and just the very long wordiness and all that stuff, I'm not a huge fan of, but I do like it. Don't get me wrong. Also, I do think, I know it sounds weird saying this, even though they have Gnomish Cunning, but I feel like Gnomes could use a little bit more. And I think that's because, again, sorry for the bright screen, guys, is that Gnomes prior, so if we look at Gnome, if you look at the Rock Gnome, they got Artificer's Lore. Whenever you make an intelligence, history check related to magic items, alchemical objects, or technological devices, you can add twice your proficiency bonus instead of any proficiency bonus you normally would apply. I'm not sure if I want to see a proficiency get added, because you're picking force and rock, which is kind of like, oh, do you want to be an intelligence gnome or a force gnome, like a wisdom gnome, even though it doesn't affect your skills at all, or at least it doesn't affect your ASIs at all. I would like to see there be a thing that says like, all right, you get to pick either 2 tools or 2, I guess, skills in this. They can do either like nature, or you can do arcane or something like that. I don't know. I feel like gnome could use one more thing, because I know gnomish cunning is extremely strong, but like getting an extra minor illusion or getting 2 cantrips just doesn't feel like it's enough, because that's literally all gnomes are getting is dark vision and gnomish cunning. And don't get me wrong, gnomish cunning is a 10 out of 10, you know, when it comes to racial abilities, but I feel like they could use a bit more, like one other small thing, either like a flavor thing or like a skill or just something small. That's just my opinion. Halfling Brave, you have advantage on saving throws you make to avoid or end the frightened condition on yourself. So basically a worse version of gnome cunning. Like, to be honest, like it only works on frightened, which I believe is usually wisdom, and it's only on frightened conditions. So if it's something different, it just won't work. So, but Brave is still good. Halfling Nimbleness, you can move through this, move through the space of any character that is of size larger than yours, but you can't stop there. All right, that's something they could do before. I guess there was some people were letting halflings like stay inside of their allies, or if like an ally somehow got bigger or like casted in large or something like that, and they took up, you know, 2x2 or 3x3 squares, they could just stay inside them, which was kind of weird. But luck, when you roll a 1 on a d20 of a d20 test, I don't know why they say that. When you roll a 1 on the d20 of a d20 test, you can re-roll the die and you must use the new roll. Okay, I have to see what that means. I was like, why don't they just say when you roll a 1 on a d20 test, but it says when you roll a 1 on a d20? Because the d20 test already says you're rolling a d20. So why don't, I guess they could simplify this and just say when you roll a 1 on a d20 test, you can re-roll the die and you must use the new roll. So especially since, I mean, essentially people are saying this is a buff, because if you roll a 1 now, it's an automatic fail. And now with this halfling luck ability, now you can like not automatically fail, which was already kind of the case anyway. I feel like 90% of the time, if you rolled a 1 on something, you were kind of failing anyway. I know I used that example before that, oh, well, if you have resilient, that's what that feat's called, resilient constitution, in conjunction with you have proficiency in constitution, and you have like a +3 or +4 in constitution, like even if you rolled a 1, you could probably still pass the roll sometimes, even if you roll a 1. But I guess resilient constitution and being proficient in constitution is kind of the same thing. But regardless, there were ways, albeit rare, but there were ways you could pass a constitution check, like even if you rolled a 1. I think as if you had like bless up as well. Like there was times where I had like bless, resilient constitution, and yeah, something like that. Like all those things would definitely help. Naturally stealthy, you have proficiency in the stealth skill. I still think halflings need like one more thing, because didn't they change? So halflings, again, sorry for the bright screen, guys. I'm going to say that every time. So Lightfoot. I guess there was somewhat balance around the fact that... Oh, that's dwarves. What happened here? I guess there was somewhat balance around the fact that like one got some stats, the other ones didn't. So lucky, brave, halfling nimbleness, stout resilience. So this is what they lost. You have advantage on saving throws against poison, and you have resistance against poison damage. I think they should add that. I just don't think that what they have here is generally enough. You have advantage on a very situational saving throw. You can move through other creatures, which how often does that really happen? Not that often, not as often as you think, unless you're in very, very confined spaces. And you get the reroll ones, which don't get me wrong, that's very, very good. But again, that's only 5% of the time that's going to happen. So again, situational saving throw, that's only going to happen 5% of the time statistically. And then a situational time, we're going to actually run through other people's spaces. I think they need the poison resistance. I think they should still keep that in there. Pretty much every aspect of the halfling is like situational, but if it does happen, you would want to have it. But again, I think it's just too situational. I think they should have the poison resistance on top. Orcs, so they got rid of the half orc as well as the half elf. So I thought half elf, and other than variant human, was pretty much the best race in 5th edition. 4 ASIs, it was divvied up the perfect way that worked well for a paladin, a warlock, a sorcerer, a bard, even classes that didn't really care too much for charisma. Like a lot of people like the half elf features because like you couldn't get put to sleep. You got like 2 extra skills. And then later on they added some things where you could actually pick some of the elf lineage traits. So you could like be a half elf, but instead of 2 skills, you could pick up like the drow spell casting or like the wood elf extra move speed and stuff like that. Like I think that's why half elf was so good, even if you weren't always a charisma based character. But regardless, anyway, that's a tangent. Orc traits, adrenaline rush. You can dash. You can take a dash action as a bonus action. When you do so, you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to your proficiency bonus. Again, this kind of feature, you can use this trait a number of times equal to proficiency bonus. You gain it back on a long rest. This is something that's perfect for, you know, Barbarian. After he rages on his first round, he tries to close the gap, or he just can't reach a creature. You can use his bonus action to close that gap and keep attacking. Obviously, a fighter. Honestly, I thought about putting this on something like a spellcaster, right? I think having bonus action mobility is very, very strong, just in general, especially if you can, ideally you do it preemptively, because if you're using your dash action, or same thing with the Ardling, if you're trying to use a fly ability as your bonus action and there's already a creature right next to you, you're taking an attack of opportunity. But a lot of the time, some people will notice like, all right, if I move and do a spell, like those 2 guys can still get in range of me and attack me, or sometimes they are going to focus me. So in this scenario, sometimes giving yourself, like even being a wizard orc, I know it sounds weird, but you technically can, because now there's no ASIs tied to your race. You could be a wizard orc and you can cast a spell as an action, use your movement, and then bonus action, like get further away and give yourself some temporary hit points. And give yourself an extra 2 or 3 hit points, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but for a wizard or a sorcerer, giving yourself anywhere between an extra, you know, because you can do it twice a day, essentially, anywhere between, you know, extra 4 to 6 temporary hit points a day, it really adds up, especially, again, if you're one of those squishy D6 classes. So I like this ability. Do I like it more than the Savage Attacker that the half-orc got? Meaning that if you critted on a melee weapon roll, you could like add an extra weapon die. I think I like this a bit more, because the other one was a bit more situational. This you can do whenever you want. Dark Vision, you have range within whatever. Powerful build, you count as 1 size larger. I think everyone knows that's one. Drag, push, and all that stuff. So a lot of people are upset that this doesn't count towards grappling. So if you are grappling a creature and moving them, you should be able to count as 1 size larger. So maybe you aren't slowed or something like that. Or if you are medium, you count as 1 size larger, so you are large. And now you can grapple things that are huge. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I think this is fine as is. But I do think powerful build at the very least should give you a advantage on grapple, or maybe you can double. I don't know about doubling your proficiency for escape DC, but maybe if powerful build involves something with like your escape DC or your ability to escape, grapple checks, something like that. I think there's something should be here incorporating grapple. That's just my personal opinion. And of course, Relentless Endurance, when you are reduced to 0 hit points, but not killed outright, you can drop to 1 hit point instead. Once you use this trait, you can't do so again until you finish long rest. And again, this is actually another reason why I kind of like potentially using a spellcaster as an orc, because it says right here, when you're reduced to 0 hit points, but not killed outright, you can drop to 1 hit point instead. So it's not like you were dropped to 0 and then you gain a hit point. It doesn't say you gain a hit point. It says you drop to 1 hit point instead. So if you are concentrating on a spell, let's say you have 5 hit points, Goblin shoots you with an arrow and you take 6 hit points. So instead of dropping to 0, you instead drop to 1. So you maintain concentration. Of course, you have to make a concentration check, but you're not unconscious. You didn't fall unconscious at any point. You just went down to 1 instead. It's almost like you just took 4 points of damage instead of the 6, right? And you stopped at 1. So that's why there could be some benefit. I mean, I do think some people could use Orc for some spell casting stuff, because the extra temporary hit points, because that's one of the big things as a wizard and sorcerer, right? Or even bard, right? Is that just the low HP you have, the low AC, which I do think shield is going to get reworked. I know that's something I mentioned earlier, but yeah, I like this. Tiefling, Abyssal. We're going to double time it because we've been going on for a while. 1 hour. Can't believe I've been talking for an hour. Tieflings, you can be medium or small. So again, you can be small here too. It's weird that orcs, dwarves can't be small, or choose to be small, I should say. Tieflings, Dark Vision, Fiendish Legacy, okay, whatever. 3rd level spells, and resistance. So, and then where is it? I thought they had resistance to. Okay, it says it here, I guess. Yeah, here it is. So Fiendish Legacies, Abyssal, you have resistance to poison damage, and you know the poison spray cantrip. Ray of Sickness and Hold Person. Hold Person is good. Of course, it's such a save or suck spell that it might not be ideal, right? Sometimes you cast it and it just doesn't work. Ray of Sickness is not the best spell, and then Poison Spray is obviously terrible. So many creatures are resistant to poison damage, and I don't believe the range is that far. Maybe I'm thinking of Acid Splash, but I know it's not ideal. So I do think Abyssal is the weakest. Chthonic, I think that's how you pronounce it. It's not Chthonic or Chthonic. You have resistance to necrotic damage, which is pretty good. It's more high level stuff, like mid high level, like tier 2, tier 3 play, and I notice a lot of necrotic damage. Not so much level 1 unless there was a lot of undead or like cultists or something like that. You also know the Chill Touch cantrip, which I think low key people sleep on Chill Touch. People forget the amount of utility Chill Touch has. The fact that whenever you hit a creature with Chill Touch, they can't recover hit points. So anytime there's a creature that has the ability to get healed by someone else, obviously from another caster or something like that, that's great utility. Also, it does necrotic damage, which is not resisted that often. And there was something else that Chill Touch did, but I can't remember off the top of my head. I definitely knew the big appeal of it was the fact that they couldn't recover hit points, which was like a pretty big deal. I know it's like rare, but whenever you're fighting a big baddie or you just feel like there's an opportunity, I think it works for trolls too, because trolls like regenerate health every so often. But if you hit them with Chill Touch, you don't have to hit them with fire, even though that's probably the easiest way to do it. Regardless, False Life, a free D4. I think +1. I forgot. I thought there was something else you had. Maybe False Life is just straight up at 1d4. But you get that 1 free False Life a day. That's not terrible. Then Ravenfield Mint is not very good. Infernal, you get Firebolt, which is good cantrip. Hellish Rebuke, decent. Reaction spells are always great. And then Darkness, again, it's kind of that troubling spell where it's like, all right, it's good, but it's so situational that like one miscasting of it, or if you place it in a wrong spot one time, you could really just screw over an entire encounter. Now, nobody can see, and sometimes you actually end up helping the bad guys, because if you cast it on them, they can kind of poke in and out and shoot you. But if you cast it on your guys, they have to step out and use an ability and then come back. But now, certain abilities like Bless or Spiritual Guardians, where you have to like see your allies in order to like cast stuff or in order to like do certain things. If you're all in darkness, you can't see anybody. So now that doesn't work. So darkness has always been kind of a problem spell. And I kind of hope Wizards of the Coast finds a way to maybe rework it. Maybe it's like when you cast darkness, you can pick a certain amount of creatures that can see through the darkness. I know that's very, very overpowered, but at the same time, it's like, I just can't think of an alternative. I honestly have not seen, out of all the games I've played, and I've easily played probably nearly 100 games of Adventure League, I think I've seen darkness twice, like maybe, just because it's such a troublesome spell. That's just what I've seen personally. Okay, so backgrounds. So they talk about backgrounds. I'm not going to dig too much into the backgrounds, because at the end of the day, they actually encourage you to build your own background. So it says, how does it influence your current overview, worldview, all that stuff. I don't want to dig too much into the backgrounds, because I know they encourage you to make a custom one first, which looks like this. So ability score. So basically you get to pick a +2 and a +1, or you get to pick 3 +1s. So, rest in peace, all the +4 ASI classes, or races, I should say, kind of like the Mountain Dwarf as well as the Half Elf. I like those classes because +4 ASI was like nuts. I know most other races only got a +3, but now it seems like the new baseline is just +3. Skill proficiencies, you choose 2 skills. Your character gains proficiency in them. You choose 1 tool, and then you pick a language. So there are some characters that could know anywhere between like 3 to 4, maybe 5 languages at level 1, depending on like which feat they pick and race and all that stuff. You also get to choose a first level feat your character gains, and you gain 50 gold pieces. So again, I'm not going to go too much into like individual feats. I think they're all flavorful, they look awesome, and all of that, but you can customize it, and I think that's what 90% of people are going to do, because if that's the case, then Gladiator, so Magic Initiate, Primal, Guard, Farmer. So that means pretty much anyone that wants a tough feat would always pick Farmer. So that means every tough character would always be a Farmer, which would be kind of boring. That's why I think 90% of people are just going to make a custom background, because maybe they like the tough feat, but they don't want to know Halfling, and they'd rather have Smith's tools, and they'd rather have different skill proficiencies, and all that stuff. So everyone's just going to customize it and do what they want. So I'm not focusing too much on the backgrounds. Hermit Noble, blah, blah. Sage, so it's still going. I'm trying to get down to the feats. Feats, here we go. So alert. All right, we're in the home stretch, guys. Hang in there with me. Alert. Always on the lookout for danger. You gain the following benefits. Initiative proficiency. When you roll initiative, you add your proficiency bonus to the roll. And then initiative swap. Immediately after you roll initiative, you can swap your initiative with the initiative of one willing ally you can see in combat. You can't make this swap if you or the ally is incapacitated. Which is another interesting thing. I think incapacitated, so this is what, page 15? Incapacitated actually doesn't say anything about, which is kind of interesting, about movement. So does that mean if you're incapacitated, can you still move? Because it doesn't say your speed is 0. I mean, they went out of their way to say it here on Grappled, your speed is 0. But if you're incapacitated, can you still technically move? It also doesn't say, like, you know, your hit points are 0 or something like that. So I thought that part was kind of interesting. I know it's kind of a side point, but alert. So in some ways this is a buff, in some ways this is a nerf. Some people are saying, well, you can't be surprised. We don't know how surprise is going to work. Again, I think it's just disadvantage on initiative. If that is the case, I would still like to have alert, to still have that, like you are immune to surprise round, or like you just can't roll disadvantage on initiative. Like, I think that would be pretty cool, because you're just always alert. And strictly numbers wise, this is a nerf on the front end. So you get a +5, with the old alert feat, you had +5 and you can't be surprised. This one, until you hit like level 17, I think, or like 14, you have a +4. And then like when you hit 14, then you have a +5. And now you're kind of at the same par as the old alert feat. But I think the swap ability is very, very strong. Because at first, trust me, the alert feat, I was like, all right, that's kind of cool, but like it's a nerf. Like, why would you only want a +2 or +3? For the majority of your campaign, and then you don't get a +5. But the swap is really important, because if you are a spellcaster, let's say you're a wizard, and you have one of your friends that's a rogue, he rolls a 21. So you roll a 5, you rolled really poorly. You rolled like a 1 or 2 on your initiative plus your all that stuff. So you rolled really poorly. So the fact that you can swap with him means that essentially you got like a +14 or like a +15 to your initiative, because now you can swap with the rogue. Because sometimes the rogue wants to go last, so the Barbarian and Fighter gets in melee with some other creatures and they can shoot with their range ability for sneak attack. Or at the same time, because you're at the top of the round as a wizard, you can set up your slow spell or hypnotic pattern, or sometimes all the creatures are just in a perfect scenario or in a perfect position for a certain spell. And you can tell the rogue, just let him know, like, hey, dude, if you go at the end of the round, you can get sneak attack easier. And if I go at the top, I think we should switch because I want to cast this spell. It's like, okay, cool. And it's done. Essentially, you just giving yourself a +15 into something else, right? Or again, you could beat that rogue, so you get high initiative and you're always swapping with someone else so they can get in a better position. Because, something with like clerics. Sometimes clerics want to be at the top of the round so they can cast like bless or whatever buff spells and they can get, other allies involved. Or sometimes they want to be at the end of the round where people are taking damage, and, you might have the barbarian, or maybe not the barbarian, but like the fighter, or you might have some character take a ridiculous amount of damage. So they either got crit or something happened. Which I completely missed the whole crit mechanic. That monsters can't crit anymore. I'll have to talk about that after this, if I remember. And you want someone else to go first. So yeah, I think overall, I think this is kind of a buff. It's only weird if you and a lot of allies have like initiative that are like really close to each other. I guess going before one another does help, but sometimes what's more important is going before the enemies, right? Crafter, tool proficiency of 3 items, you get a discount. I think this one's not that good. You're just saving gold, and at the end of the day, usually being short on gold and crafting stuff, like this is a flavorful feat, but it's not mechanically very good, in my opinion. Like, it's not going to help you at the end of the day beat an encounter or anything like that. It's just going to save you a bit of money, and that's pretty much it. Save a bit of money and time. Healer feat. You have the training and intuition to administer the first aid and others carefully. So battle medic, you have the healer's kit. You can expend 1 use of it and tend to a creature within 5 feet of you as an action. That creature can expend 1 of its hit dice, and you roll that die. The creature then regains a number of hit points equal to the bonus roll. So in a way, this is a buff and a nerf. So before the battle medic like healer feat, how it worked is you rolled a d6 and plus your level. It was something like that. It was plus something else, but it was a d6. So if you use it on something, if you use it on any class that was a d8, d10, or d12, it was a nerf, right? It was like, oh, I'm only recovering a d6. But this, you can use their hit dice. But then again, you're asking the downed creature to use a resource they have, which is a hit dice, to then regenerate health. What I would like to see instead is like that creature can expend one of its hit dice. I'd rather just say, you know, when you use this, they regenerate health equal to their hit dice. They don't have to spend a hit dice, but that creature then regenerates. Creature can expend one of its hit dice and you roll that die. The creature regains the number of hit points. I'd rather just have it say this. The creature regains the number of hit points equal to their hit dice plus your proficiency bonus. Something like that. I'd rather not see the downed creature use up a resource when they are downed. Although I think that does kind of feed into the fact that, you know, people want D&D to be more deadly. I think they want a bit more resource management. There needs to be a bit more of a punishment rather than just like going down, then up, then down, then up, then down, then up. So I kind of get that they need to use a hit dice, but kind of on the fence about that. The next one, healing rerolls. Whenever you roll a die to determine the number of hit points you restore with the spell. With this feat's battle medic benefit, you can reroll the die if it rolls a 1. Okay, so long story short, if you roll a 1 on a healing spell, you can reroll it. I think this is a bit underwhelming. You could reroll the die if it rolls a 1. It also works for the ability too. So if you roll a 1 on their hit die, you can also re-roll it. So that's kind of cool. And you must use the new roll. I would rather see either you get to roll again. So if it says, if you roll a 1 on the die, you get to roll again. So basically you could get lucky and roll a 1 and then you re-roll it again and then you get an 8, say for like a rogue. Now they get the 1 plus the 8 plus your proficiency rather than just a re-roll, because you might just get another 1. I don't know. Like I feel like this feat isn't good enough for a spellcaster, for like a life cleric. A lot of them are like, oh, we want to add abilities that encourages healers to take this feat. I still wouldn't take this feat as a healer. Like I'd much rather have, honestly, a magic initiate. I'd much rather have lucky. I'd much rather have some of these other feats rather than I occasionally re-roll 1s on a healing spell, right? Like I'd much rather have, and the whole battle medic ability, you're probably not going to be using this as a spellcaster, because again, using a healer's kit requires your action. So only in very niche circumstances would you then run over to a character, use your healer's kit to revive them, and then use your bonus action as a healing word to revive someone else. So maybe it's not terrible. Now that I'm actually like thinking about like talking it out, maybe it's not a terrible ability, but again, I'm still on the fence of it. I think re-rolling 1s is like nice, but it doesn't come up enough to like warrant an entire feat. Lucky. You have a number of luck points equal to your proficiency bonus. You can now spend the points on the benefits below, and you regain your expended luck points when you finish a long rest. Advantage. Immediately after you roll a d20 for a d20 test, you can spend 1 luck point to give yourself advantage on the roll. So someone in a comment of another video I read brought up a very good point, which is if you have advantage on already, you can't roll another dice and then you get to pick the roll, because that was kind of like the old verbiage of the old lucky feat, is that basically you get to like roll another dice and you get to pick any die you wanted. I think there was another content creator that said like some people would purposely find a way to have disadvantage on a roll, so they roll 2 d20s and then they roll another die, but because there's a last little piece of verbiage on the lucky feat that says you get to pick the d20, essentially you just get to pick whichever one of the 3. You kind of give yourself super advantage, which I think is a bit silly. But what the way this works is you can't use this on advantage. And can you use this on disadvantage? Because it says immediately after you roll a d20, because you have to do it after you roll the d20. So let's say you had disadvantage. You roll 2 d20, you rolled a 2 and a 5. And so then you afterward, you're like, all right, I want to use luck. Then what do? Do you take the lower number or the higher number? Because if you take the higher number, you then basically just bypass the disadvantage and now you have advantage. But then if you use the lower roll, you just keep the advantage. So is it just a wash? Like personally, how I would rule it as a DM is that it's just a wash. I would just say, hey, do you want to use luck? They say yes. You get rid of both dice and you roll another d20. There's someone else mentioned that like, all right, if you roll it with disadvantage, you have to call which one is the initial roll or like the solo roll or whatever. And then that's like the die you use if you do use luck, but then you have to remember every time you roll with disadvantage, which is just a headache. So that's one thing that's interesting, is that it says you have advantage, but if you have disadvantage, which die roll do you get rid of? Do you have to roll again? How does that work? Disadvantage. When a creature rolls a d20 for an attack roll against you, you can spend 1 luck point to impose disadvantage on that roll. So this makes a bit more sense. It says when a creature rolls a d20 for an attack roll, you can spend. So this is like as the roll is happening, or even before. So it says, all right, the ogre is going to attack you. Like, all right, I want to pose disadvantage. Now the DM knows, okay, now I'm going to roll 2 dice, or maybe you roll 1, I roll 1, however you want to do it. But this is like after the dice has happened, after the 2 dice is rolled, and then you get to decide afterward, it gets a bit weird. So I think them spelling this out a bit more would help. Magic Initiate. This one I think this one got infinitely stronger compared to what it was before. So Magic Initiate, you could pick a spell from, any of the class lists: Cleric, Wizard, Sorcerer, Bard, whatever, it doesn't matter. But 2 things about it that kind of helped rein it in and made it that it wasn't absurdly OP, because I do think this is very OP. One is that you had to pick the ability modifier for the class. So if you picked Bard, you had to pick Charisma, and if you picked Wizard, it had to be an intelligence-based casting, Cleric, Wisdom, whatever. So you could be a Paladin, and yeah, you could pick Wizard, and you could pick Shield as your first level spell, and then you could pick Firebolt and whatever else, Prestidigitation. But whenever you casted Firebolt, it was based on intelligence. So of course your intelligence is probably not great as a Paladin. So at least you had a ranged option, but it wasn't great. But this, 2 things is that, and on top of that, whenever you cast Shield that one time, because it doesn't matter what ability modifier you use for Shield, this time now you get to pick whichever ability modifier you want. It doesn't matter what spell list you pick. So it says 2 cantrips. You learn 2 cantrips from your choice of the spell list. First level spell. So choose a first level spell from the spell list. You always have that spell prepared. You can cast it once without a spell slot, and you regain the ability to cast it in a way you would when you finish a long rest. You can also cast the spell using any spell slots you have. Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma is your spell casting ability for these spells. Choose, when you use this feat, blah, blah, all that stuff. So what this means is that you can, again, this is my min-maxing mind, munchkin mind going out here, prepared for every Paladin to take Shield. Every Paladin's going to pick Sorcerer. It doesn't matter if they pick Sorcerer or Wizard, because now they can choose Charisma. It doesn't matter what spell list. It's going to pick Arcane, and they're going to use Charisma. Now they're going to cast Shield as many times as they want, because now they're going to pump their AC up to what, like 22, 25. And with an AC that high, you can't be grappled, because grappled is based off of AC. You have to actually hit with an unarmed strike first, and then you can grapple. And on top of that, now you're going to have ridiculously high AC. So expect like Ranger, expect Warlock. Well, Warlock already has access to Shield now with this new spell list, I assume. So like Ranger, Druids. Why not Druids? Like, you're going to have all these different spellcasters. Cleric, you're going to have Cleric now casting Shield using Wisdom. And because Clerics don't have any attack roll cantrips, they only have like Toll the Dead, Sacred Flame. Those are all saving throws. But now they can actually pick the Wisdom or Arcane spell class. Now they can cast Shield as many times as they have spell slots. And now they can cast Firebolt using Wisdom, and they can use, I don't know, whatever utility cantrip else that they want, right? Because sometimes it's better to use a saving throw cantrip, and sometimes it's better to use an attack roll cantrip. Just depends on which one, right? So, and vice versa, right? I do think you will have a lot of, assuming that there's a Wizard or a Warlock or a Sorcerer that doesn't pick up Ardling, or a race that doesn't give them like healing abilities, they'll just pick Magic Initiate and then do Healing Word. And as long as you have spell slots, you can just cast Healing Word. Because usually that's kind of like the bare minimum you need to be a healing class. As long as you have Healing Word and you have spell slots, you can just keep people up. Not indefinitely, but you can keep people up through multiple combat scenarios doing that. So I would say expect, like, if you have like a party of 5 and 4 of them are spellcasters, so you have a Barbarian, then you have like a Paladin, a Bard, a Wizard, and a Druid, expect all those spellcasters to have probably Shield and or Healing Word. So if you have 80% of your party able to cast Healing Word and 60% of your party able to cast Shield, it's going to be really hard to down anybody, because they're going to have ridiculously high AC. And if they are down, any one of them could just use Healing Word and pick them back up, right? So I do think it's, and I think the main reason for this is that they get to pick their ability modifier, and they can cast it as many times as they just have spell slots. So I think the ability modifier thing isn't that big of a deal, because that's mostly going to be for attack spell cantrips. Like, I could also see a Sorcerer or even a Wizard picking up like Guiding Bolt. Like, why not? Like, if you're a Sorcerer, you pick up Guiding Bolt, and now you can dual cast Guiding Bolt on 2 different creatures. You don't have to take the Divine Soul Sorcerer anymore. And it says whenever you gain a new level, you can replace one of the spells you chose for this feat with a different spell. And that's another thing too. Each time you level up, now you can swap out spells. You can replace one of the spells you chose for this feat. So that includes cantrips too. So you can't replace both your cantrips and a first level spell. It's like either one of your cantrips or first level spell. Also, fully expect every, again, paladin. Well, paladin's already gonna have access to it. So sorcerer, warlock, bard, and wizard to all take guidance. If they take healing word, they're also gonna take guidance. There's literally no reason to not take guidance if you are picking up the divine spell list. You're always gonna probably take healing word, shield of faith, like all the bonus action spells, because wizards and sorcerers as well as warlocks don't have a ton of bonus action spells. They have a lot of reaction spells, and clerics and wizards, or sorry, clerics and druids don't have a lot of reaction spells, but they have a good amount of bonus action spells. So like you can kind of cover all of your bases with this feat. And I think and especially the way 5e works, like a lot of the really good spells are kind of front loaded on level 1. You get a lot of bang for your buck with stuff like this, not including things like, I guess you could do like Find Familiar, then like you cast Find Familiar. If you just happen to find a way to keep it alive a lot, the next time you level up, now you can switch that first level spell for something else like shield. So level 1, you pick Find Familiar. Let's say your DM doesn't really kill off your familiar like hardly at all, and you strictly use it for utility purposes, and you never put it in danger. Now you basically have a free Find Familiar as long as it just stays alive, right? So going on, musician, gain tool proficiency with 3 musical instruments, inspiring song. This is really cool. I just don't like how this would feel more unique if, I'll read it out. As you finish a short rest or a long rest, you can play a song on a musical instrument with which you have tool proficiency and give inspiration to allies who hear the song. The number of allies you can affect this way equals your proficiency bonus. So at level 1, you can only affect 2 people, so it's like yourself and like one other person or 2 allies, and then as it goes up. The fact that it's so easy to get inspiration, all you have to do is what? Be a human or roll a d20. And honestly, it would feel so bad as a musician. Like, let's say there's 3 people in your party. 1 guy's a human, the other 2 is yourself and someone else, and you cast this. Okay, we all have inspiration. And then 2 rolls later, because you guys are trying to, you know, barter with the merchant, one of you rolls a d20, and you're like, all right, well, we have inspiration. Wait, all of us already have inspiration. All right, that's just gone to waste now. So it's weird. It's, in the sense, it's like gaining inspiration gets worse the more people have inspiration already. You know, because like the bank of inspiration die you can use is based on how many people are in your party, and this just kind of fills it up faster, and it's just really, really weird. I also don't like the fact you can only use this on a shorter or long rest. I would like to see this just be like a 10-minute thing, you know. Hey, it's kind of like inspiring leader. Instead of like it strictly being revolved around rests, just have it be just like a 10-minute thing. You could just do it, because sometimes you might not do it first thing in the morning, because again, half your party is humans, because they all want to have 2 feats at level 1, so all of them already have inspiration already, and you'd be wasting half of your musician feat. So I don't know what needs to change here, but I would like to see more of this. Change it to not just be rest, just have it be that, and then maybe inspiration. Maybe you can add something to inspiration, or when you roll inspiration you have advantage instead, which I guess already gives you advantage. I don't know, I like to see something that adds to inspiration. You get inspiration and it adds to it, right? Not sure how that would work, but like, I don't know, the musician feat just feels a little underwhelming to me. Like, I know giving everyone advantage throughout the day is awesome, don't get me wrong, but the issue is if they already have advantage, or if they then earn, or if they already have an inspiration. But if they then earn inspiration and everyone's already filled up, then it goes to waste. So Savage Attacker, this is not changed at all. It says you have trained to deal particularly, basically this just means you have advantage with your weapon damage rolls. So you have a great axe, you roll d12, and essentially every time you attack you roll 2d12, you take higher the 2, and that's your damage. Overall, this feat is very, very weak. I think someone's probably crunched the numbers, but if I had to guess, it's probably anywhere between like 2 to 3 extra damage a turn. And again, you can only use this once per turn, so it's not like because you have extra attack, your first attack you have advantage with damage, and the second attack you have advantage with damage. I totally understand why they only have it once per turn, because something like Fighter, right? If you do 6 attacks in one turn at level 11, all of a sudden now you're adding advantage on all those attacks, like the damage wise, not the roll, but damage, that can add up. But what they really should do, in my opinion, in order to make this feat even worthwhile adding, and I think it works out perfectly because they just removed this from the game essentially, is Savage Attacks. When you scroll a critical hit with a melee weapon attack, you can add 1 roll of the weapon's damage dice 1 additional time and add it to the extra damage to the crit. They should just add this to the feat. Just add it as an extra paragraph. Okay, you can gain this benefit once per turn. And on top of that, if you do roll a crit, you get to add one more damage dice. So that's kind of counterintuitive to crit. So if you roll a great axe, you roll a D12 because that's the weapon. Roll a D12 because the crit, and then you roll another D12 because of Savage Attacker. And now if you want to use this feature on that roll because you want to roll 3D12, that's the best case scenario. So like, not only do you get to roll an extra die, but you also get to have advantage on it. And it's still once per turn. You can only do it once per turn for the reroll. But now anytime you crit, you get to roll an extra damage die. So it's kind of like grabbing that Savage Attacker from Barbarian on here. I know that would probably stack ridiculously well with something like Barbarian. But again, if you're dedicating a whole feat to Savage Attacker, I still think overall that's still less damage than Great Weapon Master. And at least Great Weapon Master, you can do it on every attack, even if you don't crit. So you're just like plus 10 damage, plus 10 damage, plus 10 damage. But with Savage Attacker, it's like it only happens when you crit, and you can only do the reroll once per turn. And that's it. I don't think that would be an overpowered ability at all whatsoever. So I would say just add this Savage Attacks to Savage Attacker on top, and now it's actually a viable feat. Because now you're actually increasing your damage output by more than 2 to 3 points. Now it's 2 to 3 plus an additional weapon die. Skilled. You have proficiency at 3 skills that you lack proficiency in. Okay, that's whatever. Again, more of a roleplay thing, and unless your DM really plays heavily into skills, then it is what it is. Tavern Brawler. Enhance unarmed strike when you hit with your unarmed strike, and you basically deal a D4 with your unarmed strikes instead of just 1 plus your strength mod. Damage rerolls. Whenever you roll damage die for your unarmed strike, you reroll the die. If it rolls a 1, you must roll the new roll. This is basically, it's not necessarily stepping on the toes, but it feels very reminiscent of just the great weapon fighting. When you get to reroll 1s and 2s on like heavy weapons, it definitely feels like that. I kind of thought about doing something like that for a Savage Attacker, where it's like, all right, if you roll a 1 or 2, you get the reroll. So that's another thing they could possibly do with Savage Attacker, but the way Savage Attacker is right now, it's just terrible. So damage rerolls, I think that's fine. Shove, when you hit the creature with an unarmed strike as part of attack action on your turn, you can deal damage to the target and also push it 5 feet away. So instead of choosing to shove or deal damage, now you can deal damage and shove in the same turn. And if you guys have noticed, there's no saving throw here. You can deal damage to the target and also push it 5 feet away. So if you're medium, you can hit a gargantuan creature and push it 5 feet away, at least according to this. Unless there's a rule here, maybe I completely overlooked something. Because it's kind of reading similarly to that push ability that the Eldritch Blast has. You can push the creature 5 feet away or knock the target prone. This shove is possible only if the target is no more than 1 size larger than you. Okay, so it is size limited, but still, regardless, no saving throw at all whatsoever. You just get to push them 5 feet away. So if you're medium, you can hit a creature up to large and just shove them away 5 feet. No saving throw. Furniture as weapons, they really need to change this. So is it only furniture? So if I pick up a mug, or if I pick up a dead goblin and want to use it as a weapon, I can't use it because it's not furniture. Oh, they got rid of improvised weapons. I think they should just leave it as improvised weapons. You can wield furniture as a weapon using the rules of the Great Club for small or medium furniture and the rules of a club for a tiny creature. All they have to do is just use improvised weapons. When you wield an improvised weapon, using the rules of the Great Club, small for, the size of the weapon, they could just replace it. I don't know why it has to be furniture. It just seems a bit weird. So if you use a mug or something like that, or a dead goblin, which is probably the size of a Great Club, I would imagine, and you just smack somebody with it, like, it should count. Tough. Again, increase your hit point maximum by 2. So these are all first level feats. And I know Jeremy Crawford explicitly said that first level feats, none of them have any +1 ASIs or anything like that. So I don't think Tavern Brawler even had a +1 ASI. Lucky didn't. I don't think any of these had +1 ASIs anyway, that I can remember, but yeah. So overall, I think the feats are fine, but some of them do need to get reworked. Savage Attacker, I think, needs to have that added ability. Magic Initiate, I think, is just super strong. I know people want to keep casting spells of it, but that's what opened up the whole can of worms of, like, the reason why Magic Initiate wasn't used a lot is because you could only cast it once per day. which sucks, don't get me wrong, but it seems like it's all or nothing. It's either nothing, where you can only cast it once and that's it, and okay, now Magic Initiate sucks, or it's like you can cast it as many times as you want, and now it's almost the equivalent of taking a 1 level dip into Cleric. Because like, to be honest, most people that take a dip into Cleric, like, don't get me wrong, armor proficiencies are great, but like, and all that stuff, but I mean, you still get plenty of armor using shield and mage armor. Like, you still get plenty high AC. But most people take Cleric, I feel like, most of the time for like guidance, healing word, sometimes guiding bolt, things like that. And again, you can swap out the spells each time you level up, so it seems a bit overpowered. And again, I think healer feat, I think it's okay as it is. I would like it to say you just roll again, or you get another roll and you get to add that. I'm not sure how they would linguistically write that out, but I think it'd be kind of cool. It's like, if you roll a 1, you just roll again. It's almost kind of like Chaos Bolt, where it's like, if you roll matching numbers, you just roll again. You can kind of like keep doing damage. In this case, like, if you keep rolling 1s, you just keep healing. So even though it's a 1 in 6 or 1 in 8 or whatever chance, you can just get lucky and you just keep rolling. So I kind of like that. And then alert, I think is great. Initially, I did not like it, but as I thought it out, and depending on the classes in your party and what class you are, sometimes going very early is good. So like wizard, spellcaster, but sometimes going late as a rogue, you want people to get within sneak attack, to get within 5 feet so you can sneak attack, or a cleric because you want to be able to heal someone that takes a lot of damage. Cool. Last but not least, hour 30 in. I appreciate you guys sticking around up to this point. Again, creatures can't critically hit, which I'm not completely against. I'd rather see if they are going to keep this, I want to see one of two things happen. Either creatures can critically hit, but it's associated with a tag. So like, all creatures that are CR 5 and lower don't have this tag that says dangerous or critical. All it needs to say is critical. And there's a little dash that says creatures with critical double their damage dice on a 20 roll. And that's it. So, because really critical hits are only devastating at like low levels. Don't get me wrong, they're devastating at high levels too, but less often are you just going to get one shot where, you're a wizard, you've already used up all your spell slots for whatever reason, you're level 1, you take damage from one arrow, now you're at 1 hit point, but you take a crit arrow from another goblin and all of a sudden you're instantly dead because now you took 12 points of damage or something like that, and you're instantly dead because you just got unlucky and that happened. So I think criticals, because I feel like Wizards of the Coast got a lot of feedback from players saying, I don't like being critically hit at low levels and getting instantly down or instantly killed. And then DMs also complaining, saying, hey, I don't like it when my big bad evil guy is also getting killed in 1 to 2 turns. So it's almost like they're nerfing it on both sides, which, all right, we won't let monsters crit anymore, but now PCs that do crit, they just won't double all their damage, just weapons and unarmed strikes, which I'm not a huge fan of. I'd rather just see crits just stay the way they are. And even if they do remove it from monsters, I think that's okay, but just add a tag that just says, all right, creatures above this CR, it's probably easier for them to put a tag that says creatures can't critically hit, and then all the other creatures can. So, because I think crits at higher levels they suck, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, you're not just going to get one shot most of the time. Or what they do is, instead of just doubling damage when you do critically hit, is that if you do roll a 20 as a minion or a creature, that an additional effect happens. Either you get pushed back 15 feet, or you have to make a poison save if you're going up against like a wyvern or something like that, or you have to maybe the attack is then a cleave and it starts hitting other people next to them or something like that. I feel like something still needs to happen on a 20 roll and just not just, oh, you hit. So I'd rather see something like, all right, you make an additional save. It's not as devastating, or maybe even if they make an extra attack, like if a creature lands a hit, a critical hit, they get to attack again, meaning, hey, I just deal normal damage this time, and now I have a chance to land another hit. So it's not as devastating as a crit where you just guarantee double damage. Now there's just a chance you get double damage, if that makes sense. So I see something like that being a bit more engaging. I kind of like the idea of having effects happen on a 20, where if you are hit by a 20, you have to make a certain save or be feared, or you just get pushed back 15 feet and you could fall off a ledge or into some sort of hazard or something like that. I kind of like that a bit more rather than just no crits and that's it, right? Yeah, that's it. I know I kind of just word vomited a lot of stuff over this hour and a half, and this is a long video, but I appreciate you guys sticking with me. Again, I know this is the first video I've done in a long time, but if I get a lot of support, I get a lot of views, and people want to see me keep making content. I would love to keep making stuff. So let me know down in the comments below what you guys think of all this. At least keep it to just the playtest material. Try not to talk too much about, you know, the virtual tabletop thing that they're doing and like any kind of marketing and is this 6th edition or 5.5 or this or that. Like just try and keep it strictly focused on the playtest material. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Hope you guys take care and I'll catch you guys next time.